Just wanted to give you a quick heads up that this is about a 12 to 15 hour project. Don't expect this to be a simple job. The mirrors will probably give you the hardest problem over anything else. Otherwise, a simple project is just swapping out the stereo. That said, understand that I'm not hooking up to any of the wiring system that's already existing. I'm only creating new wires for power and for the speakers. I've also added speakers to this bike besides the two that come with it. Hope this helps. Hey everyone, John here again for another tutorial on working on your Goldwing 86 Aspencade. So I wanted to share with you a couple things I'm going to be doing this time. Last time, if you recall in the video, I did an alternator conversion. This time I'm going to do a stereo replacement. Here again is my fantastic blue, beautiful 86 Goldwing Aspencade. All chromed up and all pretty. I'll let you know it's been I don't know, 7 or 8 months since I did the alternator conversion. It has worked fantastic except for one little glitch I came across, and that is the fact that the connector going from the battery to the alternator actually wiggled loose from the vibrations of going down the road. So if you're running pretty good and all of a sudden the battery doesn't want to charge anymore, that's most likely what the issue is. So with that said, we're going to take stuff apart. What we're going to take apart first is we're going to rip off the saddlebags like we always do to get at the seat. Now you're going to be wondering why I have to take off the seat to do the stereo replacement. Besides doing the stereo replacement, I'm actually going to be taking off the, I don't know, soda can holders, extra storage, whatever it is. Mine's got a little tear in it, so it's no big loss to me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a second set of speakers back here. My wife and all the other passengers I had said they really can't hear the speakers coming up from up in the front, so I'm just going to put some in the back this way they can hear on both sides. In order to do this job, you're going to need some tools. You're going to need a universal Allen wrench, preferably metric. The American will work on the seats, but you definitely want to get metric if you can. 10 millimeter wrench is a necessity. Electric tape, I'll show you what I'm going to do with that in a little bit, and then masking tape to mark off your cubbies, and I'll show you that again in a little bit. So again, the seat needs to come off, the full gas tank needs to come off, the mirrors need to come off because the windshield needs to come off. The headlight needs to come off, and I don't think the blinkers need to come off, or the signal lights, whatever you want to call them. I don't think those need to come off, but there's going to be a lot of dismantling. So in order to do this radio conversion, I'm also taking the clock out of the bike because the clock doesn't light up at night anyways, and the radio is going to have one. What I picked up is a pile, and hopefully not a pile of shit, but a pile is a name brand. It is AM, FM, MX, and Marine. Make sure if you buy a new stereo that it is a Marine stereo. That is very crucial. There's the model number if you need that. I got this for $60, $70, something like that. You can buy them that come with speakers, but they're just the speakers, they're not encased. So what I did is I found a cheap pair of pile speakers that'll go on the back of the bike, like I said before, on the trunk. The problem with these, and hopefully it won't be an issue later on, is they're very heavy. So you got to watch out where you put the speakers because of that. I also picked up an antenna extender because I don't know how long the antenna cable reaches. And then I picked up speaker wire. It's 100 feet, 18 gauge. I wasn't sure what gauge to get, so I figured 18 should be sufficient. If you go to Walmart, you can get it for like 11 bucks. If you go into their electronics section, you can get I think 60 feet for about $15 to $20. Like I said, I paid $10 or $11 for 100 feet, and that was in their car audio section. So make sure you get the car audio stuff. Also, because I had the alternator issue, I also picked up a little voltage meter. It's tiny as hell, so hopefully I can make that work with what I'm going to do. And I also picked up a cigarette lighter. Okay, here's the cables for it. there's the actual cigarette lighter. Mine died last year, so even though it was dead before I put the alternator in, so it's kind of pointless for me. I did pick up a cheap GPS, and I put the mount up here on top, and I just used a zip tie to hold it in place. I drilled a little hole in there and just ran it through. GPS works fine, but it's hard to hear, so I might look at something new that might actually be able to work with the new stereo. But right now, it works for what I need, and we're going to go from there. I stopped down at my local lumber yard, and I initially wanted to get plywood to use as the face for the new stereo mounting. And what he did is he said, well, why don't you use a board, because the plywood will separate after a while. And he gave me a piece of, well, it looks like 1/2 inch board here, and that works fantastic. And he's like, well, I said, you know, I'm just looking for wood. And he goes, well, you can have this. I initially went in looking for scrap. He goes, Merry Christmas, you can have this. So then he starts looking around some more and finds some pressure treated. And I said, ooh, I like that more. He's like, well, here, you can have this one too. Merry Christmas. So I can't guarantee your lumber shop is going to allow you to get free scrap, but it never hurts to ask if they have scrap laying around, because I'm sure you'll pay $1 or $2 for little stuff that they just normally get rid of anyways. So pressure treated is good. I specifically went with a black stereo. I was going to go with white because I was thinking it's modern. I want to make this bike mine. I think it would be sharp looking. And then I realized if the stereo is visible, there's a higher risk of it being stolen, and I want nothing to do with that. So, besides the pressure treated wood, I am going to put a coat of black spray paint on there to like for what you use for a grill, because it's kind of a grayish black, and it'll match what I have here. Because obviously it's an old bike, it's sun faded, and it should match pretty good. So I'm going to break this up here, and I'll talk to you in a couple seconds. Alright, I forgot to mention the bolts for the seat are here. And I'm sure some people know how to do this. I'm just making this for people who don't. And then there's one here. I've already taken them off, but I want to show you the cubby system. I did that in the last video, and I'm just going to do it again to make sure everyone knows what's going on. I have cubbies here, and I put some masking tape on it and wrote the word seat on it. What you want to do is you want to track all this stuff in your cubby department. Okay, so I've got a big thing here full of empties and some not so empties. What I do is I always start off on top, and then I work my way down until I get to the bottom, and then obviously do the next row. And you want to do this in the order that you take stuff apart. So when you go to put stuff back together, you'll know which order it goes in. A reminder, when it comes to taking the seat off, all you have to do is grab it with 2 hands. I can actually do it with 1 hand. And you want to pull it back towards the trunk. Once that unlatches, and there's a little hook up here in the front of the seat that does that, once that comes off, then all you got to do is lift the seat off, and it's ready to go. Don't forget to take off your side covers. You're going to need that in order to get at the faux tank. You can just grab onto it, and it should pop right off. A lot easier with 2 hands. There we go. One of the bolts for the faux tank is right there. I've said before, and I'll say again, 99% of the things on this bike are 10 millimeter, and that just makes your life a hell of a lot easier. You also need to come in here and rip this bad boy off, because this here will get you to the other bolt that is used to take the faux gas tank off. And don't forget to take off your covers on both sides, because you'll take those boxes off as well. Each pocket on the left and right has 4 screws that need to come out. So 1, 2, and then up at the top 3 and 4. Alright, I got both pockets off, left and right. But I wanted to point out that also on my table where I put the pieces, I have an L on there, I have an R down there, an L down there, and an R down there. It's kind of hit and miss. I mean, they really only fit on one way, but why not mark it? Because as soon as it's marked, then you'll know exactly where it goes, and you don't have to waste time playing around if it goes to the right or to the left. I'm going to take off the faux tank. There's a bolt there, there it is, a bolt there, down here, and then there's another bolt on the opposite side. Use a socket, ratchet, and an extension, and you can pull those out quite easily. A couple things I wanted to mention quick. I did make a cubby for the tank. All the bolts are the same, so it doesn't matter to me. But you want to make sure that you empty out your storage in your tank so you don't have everything flop around and lose everything that's in there. The other thing I was going to point out, when I took the left and right pockets off, I put the screws in the pocket. I didn't make a separate cubby for it because I figured it was a waste of space, and they'll hold the screws just fine. Alright, one thing I'm checking here quick is to make sure that I'm pulling 14 volts. And I'm getting the 14.4. The reason why it's important to me is I also want to check to make sure if I'm getting the same volts up here in the fuse panel. If I'm getting it up here in the fuse panel, then that means I can actually run my voltage meter right through the fuse panel and don't have to run it to the battery. Alright, pay no attention to the smoke. It's a cold start, so it always smokes for a little bit before it goes. It'll actually work. I can hook right into the fuse panel here, which makes my life a lot easier, because then I just have to run wires from here all across down here and then up into the fuse panel instead of running to the battery. My fear, of course, is if I run to the battery, it'll always be on. This way it'll turn off when I need it to. I'm sure everyone's done it before, but just in case you haven't, what you want to do is you want to stick the key into the hole here, turn it all the way to the right, and then you can pull your stereo out from there. Alright, stereo's out. I'm going to take off the mirrors because they're the hardest thing to do and they piss me off to no end. What you need to do is you need to grab the mirror and spin it so that it's laying flat like this. Then this grommet that covers the whole thing, lift this up and it'll give you access to the screws. There's two of them. There's one that's visible right now and one way up there, and that's what I hate about it. This rubber is just unforgiving and doesn't want to move, so you really got to get in there and pry with it and stuff. As you can see, it has a Phillips head on there. It also is a 10mm, so whatever you can get in there the best, that's what I suggest you use. Oh, I hate taking these stupid mirrors off. Anyways, got it off. There's the two bolts. One's long, one's short. I'm leaving them in the mirror instead of putting them in a cubby because I don't need to put them in a cubby. When I bought the bike, someone had tipped it and broke the right mirror. I mean, just completely shattered it, so I had to order a new one. The one that I ordered, like I said, it's a real pain in the ass to get at. But the left one was stock, and it looked like the bolts are set up a little bit different, so it's actually a lot easier to take apart and actually get access to the bolts. Again, I left the bolts inside, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. And also, I'll point out real quick, they are marked so you know which one is left and which one's right. I never did understand why my windshield has this little bracket on here to hold it in place. It definitely looks like a very custom job. So I'll take those off before removing the windshield. So I must admit I've never taken a windshield off before, so this is a new experience. I can't seem to get the thing to budge, so I'm going to play around with some stuff here. Down here underneath is a couple screws. There's one there, one there. I'm assuming it's going to allow me access to take off this plate to get at the headlight. There is inside here, looks like a little lip that goes in there. So I'm hoping I can just pull this thing out and then just slide it down. It should come out. And maybe that'll give me access to this panel up here and see if there's something I'm missing as far as taking off the windshield. Holy crap, that was a pain in the butt. Alright. Climber, Honda, GL1200, 84 to 87. Get the book. It helps you. On page 204, it breaks down the stuff for the Aspencade and gives you an idea on what you're supposed to do to pry that damn thing off. What you need to do is you need to take a rag with a flathead screwdriver, stick it in here and pry up. I mean, it's going to take some effort. You don't want to break anything obviously, but you got to be careful or put a little pressure on it so it does come out. I took out the screws and stuff for the side markers. Don't think I needed to, but once this thing comes up, then it gives you access to the screws to take the windshield out. It also gives you access to take out the headlight. Taking out those screws did help, but obviously I couldn't go much farther than what I did. Alright, this is what it looks like without the cover on. There are 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to take those off, and hopefully that should give me access to the headlight. I'm doing something a little dangerous. I'm putting these all in the same cubby. So even the side markers, which I might actually reassemble before too long here. But the whole idea, of course, is when I'm doing the stereo installation, I don't want to wreck anything that's original. I want to save all the stuff that's original. So if I ever sell this bike someday, someone can get all the parts and I can say, here you go, put it back together whenever you want. So right now I'm just going to take it apart the best I can so I can make room for the new. Alright, so there's actually two brackets, one that came across here and one that came across here. I took them off. I'm actually leaving the cubby for the headlights and stuff out of my cubby drawer. Here's for the bottom bracket, and then here's for the top bracket. I think I'm going to keep them close by so I know where the bolts are, and I know what position they're supposed to go in when I reassemble the bike. So now it's just a matter of seeing if I can pull out the headlight. Alright, time for a little honesty. I knew this was going to be a big project and I kind of didn't want to do it because of it. Right now I'm trying to pull the headlight out. I don't know if you can see that cable right there. It has a lot of tension on it and it won't let me pull the headlight out beyond this point here, causing a real pain in my ass. So I've got the wire harnesses, these are out, and it still doesn't give me the slack I need. Right in there is that cable I was talking about that won't give me any slack. So I'm trying to figure out where that connects to and seeing if I can get at any of the bolts back here, wherever they went to get the instrument cluster out. There's also a couple bolts in here. There's one down there. There's one up there. And one down there. It looks like those are the only three. So right now it's a matter of can I access those with the headlight the way it is. And alright, I'm at an absolute loss. There I took out, you can't hardly see it. There's a bolt there. There's actually a bolt up there, actually a nut. So both the top ones have nuts. And there's two bolts at the bottom. The bolts won't pull all the way out, and I can't find any other access to get this panel off. So I'm going to go through the book again, but I actually had to peel the chrome away to get at the speaker mounts, or the speaker screws. Looks like there's only two of them. So I just had to stick a screwdriver in, and I'll show you real quick. Nice flat-headed screwdriver, right? And I'm just going to stick it in here and twist. It's just held on by some kind of adhesive, so it comes off really nice, but just twisting and it'll pop right off. And then you can take the speakers out. I'm going to see if I can get access to the speakers, if that allows me to do something to get the instrument cluster out. Alright, I found a third screw, right about there. And there's actually a little thing here that says Honda. You just got to pop that out and then you'll have access to that screw. Alright, I got the covers off. And there's all kinds of, I don't even know what that is. Almost looks like a cotton or something. It's kind of weird, but I'm guessing it's a bunch of bug stuff. So I'm just going to take the shop vac to it and blow it and suck it off. That sounded awkward. Yeah, shop vac. Alright, so guess what taking out the speakers screws does? It allows me to take this off. And that makes me all kinds of happy because now I have access to just about everything I need to. They may not have needed to unscrew everything from the back, but we'll find out pretty quick. I'll wrap around here. Yeah, there's a couple bolts here. And we'll just kind of go from there. Alright, the video might get a little darker. It's getting closer to nighttime, so I'm not going to have as much light to work with, and I apologize for that. If you recall, I was showing you that there's nuts here. I tried to pull on the instrument cluster and only this part right here got loose. So there's something here, and then I look and it's actually cut out around here to where you have to kind of go up at an angle to get that nut off of there. Then the instrument cluster will come off. Alright, the nightmare keeps going. If you look down in here, there's a wiring harness. This is obviously what your stereo plugs into, but there's no way to detach those wires from what I can tell. So ultimately what we have to do is come around to the right hand or left hand side of the bike and look at all the garbage in here and try to figure out what I can disconnect and what I can't. This is actually all looks like electric taped all the way down up to a certain juncture, and you can see it through here. I'm not going to be able to show it off so much with the camera, but I'm just going to slowly start taking stuff apart and see what happens. I'll mention this at the beginning of the video if I haven't mentioned it already. There is no way to hook up an aftermarket stereo to the current system. So the only thing you can do is hook it up to where it'll turn on with the ignition, it'll keep the memory with the clock, and run the speakers off of it as if you were doing a car installation. Just so I have better access to stuff, I'm taking off the intercom panel. As far as I know, the intercom works. I still haven't had a chance to test it. I just don't have the helmet set up. But right here, it's an Allen nut, or an Allen bolt, I should say. There's little covers on each of these, little bungs, and I'm just taking a flathead screwdriver, just sticking it in the edge and twisting a little bit until it pops out. They're not very big, so be careful, make sure you don't lose them and whatnot. I already took this apart a little bit, but right down here are two bolts. You can see where the holes are for it. Once you get those out and you've got your cluster out, you can take and put the instrument cluster where you want. And what I did is I just put the nuts right back on the bolts here. Then what I did is there's a hole here and a hole on the other side that had two screws in it. I unscrewed those. And so right now I'm just trying to pull this cluster out of this bracket. If I can pull this apart successfully, I won't need this bracket anymore, and I can just leave the cluster sitting in back of the dash here without it affecting anything and without having to destroy anything. It really didn't take a whole lot of effort to get that out. I just had to pull a little bit, and it came right out of the back here. What I'm looking at is the two studs here on the end. I'm going to try and get some better light here. The two studs are part of the excuse me, the framework, which holds the instrument cluster in place, as well as these two nuts here. So I think what I'm going to do is all the gold parts you see in here, I'm thinking I can take these screws out here and on here and see if I can rip out those innards. The stereo I bought isn't very deep, so I should be able to keep this mounting bracket, and it won't affect anything as far as depth. There's also two screws underneath, the bigger ones is what I'm looking at, and I'll probably take the smaller ones out too, but just so you know, there are screws on top and on the bottom. I really had to bend to get it out. So, yeah, it's still salvageable. This pin came out here. Won't take a whole lot to put that back in place and then kind of straighten them back out. It will be usable again. It's just going to be, you know, someone's going to have to really work some magic to get it back in. Otherwise, it is out. And this is what it looks like when there's nothing in it, which would be perfect because that'll allow me to run my own wires through there and my antenna wire once I figure out where the antenna comes in. While I'm still mentally processing what to do with the wires, I've decided to attack the clock. What I've done is there is a nut that sits on this bolt right here. It's an 8mm. I just unscrewed that, and everything fell out except for the key thing. I am going to take that big piece of wood and I'm going to cover this entire face, so I'm not too worried about all the gaping holes here and stuff. One quick thing before I get too far also. You got the bike apart this far, do what I always say, just clean it up, grab a rag, wipe everything down. You know, you're not going to have an opportunity to get at this again unless something bad happens. So might as well get at it now, get it all cleaned up, and this way it's ready for riding season. Simplifying a solution, I decided to look at the speakers here, and they look new. I don't know if these are custom or not. They kind of look like they're brand new though. They have different kind of connections across the back. There is two gray wires coming out. I was under the impression from the schematics that it's actually supposed to be different colors. This one actually has a red stripe with a gray, and then, and maybe that's correct, I don't remember. I haven't looked in a while. Then on this side here, on the left, when you take this one out, they're both gray again, but one, and it's hard to see, has a brown strip it looks like. So I think what I'm going to do is I have those splicer nuts, and I will just take and tap into these lines, and then I will run the lines through here and come out here for both the front speakers. Then I don't have to mess around down here trying to figure out where the front speakers come in. I followed the antenna all the way across, and it actually comes to the outside of this box. and it sits right here. So what I did is I bought a 6-foot extension before I did this project, and I just ran it through here. I'll worry about tucking it in later and trying to figure out where to use zip ties on to keep it out of the way. But otherwise, that's that there. So in theory, I shouldn't have to mess with anything in here whatsoever. That's my goal. So I just got to figure out where I can tap into power. I'll most likely run to the fuse box, except for the main power that has to stay on. Then I'll probably splice into one of these cables I have here going to the battery. I'd hate to run another cable, but if I have to, I will. So that's that, and I'll let you know when I'm done. I will take and show you real quick that the stereo I bought is very tiny, very light, and it has plugs that are built in, and all the wires are labeled so I know what goes where. And what I'll do is, I think I'll wire that all up before I go forward with anything else. These look like they're 14 gauge, and like I said, my speaker wire I think is 18 gauge. That will not matter. I can tell you from someone who's installed stereos for a lot of years, the gauge really is irrelevant, except for if you start off with a bigger gauge, you don't want to go smaller, but you can definitely go the opposite way. You don't have to worry about fuses shorting out, because that's not how this operates. So I'll get that all wired up, then I'll feed everything through here, put the console back together, slide it in place, make sure I've got all my wires in there, and I can bunch up quite a bit because I'm going to have a lot of space. Not only am I going to have a lot of space inside this bracket for the stereo, because as you can see it's very small, but don't forget I'm also going to be putting this wood on there too, and that's going to give me even more to stick out. So I do have buried here, I have a router, and I'll be routing off the edges to make it look nice and routing off the corners, and well, we'll see how that goes when I get to that spot. Alright, I had to get some splicers. I had the last two from there. This is what I got at Walmart for $6, $7, whatever it was. They have two holes that you can put the wires in. And I'll actually come over here and I'll show you. I've got one on the bike right now. This is what it looks like out of the package. You put your wires in there and take a pliers and push down on the metal prong here, and what it'll do is it'll cut through both wires, not cutting them apart, but it'll splice through the casing. So I put one on here already, and then once it's on, you can see it's all pushed in, and you just push this little cover over and it snaps in place, and then it's ready to go and put on the next one. I'm going to put on the next one a little bit lower, I think, to keep up some space. And I got myself a lot of extra wire here, because in case I mess something up, I want something to play with. Also, it's not going to hurt to have extra wire. It'll just get stuffed in here because I'm going to have all that extra space behind the radio anyways. Labeling is important. We talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. This is my left front speaker, so when it comes time for me to get all these hooked up to the stereo over there, I know which speakers go where. Alright, trying to figure out the best way to run the speaker wire. So here I've got my spool and I'm running it, and if you can see it going into the side here, there's actually a hole down in here on the side with a rubber gasket around it. I don't know if that is a little bit easier to see where the light's shining. And then this blue wire right here is my speaker wire that's coming out. So I really will feed through there. So the idea then is to get the wires to feed in through there, come up behind here, and then in over here, and then I can run the other two sets out here. So if I've got both rears coming out of here, and I can feed them in through here, down through here and out, then I can worry about splitting them as I'm coming down the back of the bike and going from there. Alright, a real quick update. I stopped feeding in through there because it was too much of a pain in the butt. So it's easier to let gravity work on your side. And I'm feeding in through here first, wrapping it all the way around, coming through here, then down. And then I can just follow it all the way underneath the plates on the frame and stuff like that, and bring it all the way out the back. And then I did the left one first. Really doesn't matter how you do it. But then the next one, I'm going to run up to this junction here, and I'm actually going to cut across so it's coming out over here so I can keep an eye on which one's what. Again, I labeled on this end and on this end so that I know which ones I'm hooking up to and where. And then I actually might keep the labels on in case I ever need to do any work on it again or something. I had a brilliant idea. I was thinking about the antenna for the radio, and I figured, well, why don't I run that through here too, and I'll just run that up and have it come out here. It took a little bit of work, and I let gravity help me a little bit. So I took some old telephone wire I had laying around, dropped it down in the hole, stuck my hand way in there and fished it out, and now I can tape the antenna to that and pull the antenna right through. I'm sitting here trying to figure out how many wires to run to get to the radio. I need 3 of them. One that goes directly to the battery, one that goes to the accelerator, which will just be in the fuse, or the ignition, I mean, not the accelerator. And I also need to replace the cigarette lighter, or so I thought, but while I'm following wires around, I realized that one wire wasn't hooked up. And guess what? I have a working cigarette lighter again. Ah well, at least I figured it out now. Because I started working on the actual power, I did run my wire to the positive here, which follows up and goes over to where the radio is. I also ran my positive coming down to my accessory switch, and then I ran my ground also. I left the ground unplugged, except for that part, so as not to cause any arcing or anything while I'm getting everything set up. Otherwise, looks like I'm ready to start putting the harness on. And here's the harness that came with the set, and it's all labeled with everything on it, and I'm just going to hook it up. Alright, I'm doing the wiring. I'm not going to do any wing nuts on, or nuts on there, or whatever, wire nuts. I'm just going to twist them together and then put electric tape around them. They will hold that way, and they're yeah, that's not bad. We'll just use electric tape. Alright, I put the headlight back on. A while ago, I just forgot to mention, I put the chrome back on these because they obviously had nothing to do with it. Dash is back in place. I did turn the power on and make sure that my heads-up display is working the way it's supposed to, because obviously if it didn't, this would be the time to find out so I can take stuff apart. But I did everything right the first time, so we are all good. So I got all the wires hanging out now, and it's just a matter of getting to put the stereo in. Don't forget, I mentioned marking your cables. My red one that has the black electric tape on it, that's the one that goes straight to the battery. So looking at it now, it makes more sense to have everything tagged. Alright, so I hooked up the wiring for the power going to the stereo. I wanted to use wire nuts for what's going directly to the battery and to the ground. And then just for auxiliary, I just used the electric tape, and it was a big deal. But I still have my electric tape down here, so I know exactly which one goes to the battery and which one's for auxiliary. Now I'm going to need to tap into the one with auxiliary and tap into the ground to put my voltage meter on, and I'll be working on that shortly. Ran a quick test, everything's working the way it's supposed to. Now it's time to work on the back of the bike. I'm going to use the wood here to cut everything out and get the radio to fit in there, but that's going to be a tomorrow project. So for now, I'm going to take these things off. If you don't know how to do it, open your trunk. You'll find 5 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it should pop right off. Alright, it's simply not fair. Nothing works the way it's supposed to, and I've got stuff laying around here that you may not have laying around at home. I got that pressure treated wood, and it split while I was carving it. Could have done without that. I've got some plastic from an old sign laying here. It's thick enough to do what it needed to do, but it's also very old and very brittle, and that busted up. So what I did is I had another car stereo laying around the garage, and I have a faceplate for a 1999 Pontiac Montana, because I was going to put an aftermarket stereo in that. And this is what that looks like. And it really fits in there, and you got to push the pins down to hold everything in place. There's pins here that you can just push up on top and bottom, and that stays there. What I did do is I had a little piece of that plastic yet that I needed for my voltage meter, and I cut that to the size here. As the plate is a little loose here, by putting this in place, it doesn't do anything for movement. I also had laying around some foam, and what I'm going to do with the foam is I have some double-sided tape in my pocket, and I'll tape that part down on here to raise this up so that it'll look pretty close, and I'll also keep it watertight. And then the foam part, I'll put that double-sided tape on there so I can just tape this piece down. I obviously got that cut out for my voltage meter. The voltage meter has two little tabs on it, one on each side. And forgive the sunlight here. And I'm probably just going to take some super glue and just tab that into this plastic part here. And then I will put it all back together and the bike should be done. I did dry fit the stereo in there, and I wanted to see how much space I had to play with. And I'll have to tuck some wires in here and there, but otherwise everything looks like it's good. Everything looks great. Speakers are mounted where they're supposed to be. The stereo sound is just phenomenal. Can't wait to go down the road and get pulled over. Alright, we're going to do a situation. So here's the wires. I don't know if you can see it so well. I actually had to grind this down. I put tape here so you can see where it went. It still isn't quite enough, so if I turn too far, it'll actually lift this whole thing up a little bit. So my recommendation to you is if you're going to use a housing like this, try and grind off the back of it as much as possible so it sits flat up against the dash. Then you don't have to worry about raising it with foam tape like I did here. And I also put a little foam tape on the side here as well. Before I put the stereo back in there and reinsert the screws, I did put on some cable straps. You can get them at Mono Price. They're called Hook and Loop. I don't remember how much they are. They're fairly cheap, but what it is, it's all Velcro strips. You just feed it through the loop and you can keep everything nice and tidy together. So I'm going to put the bike back together and see what happens. Yeah, we'll go from there. Alright, it's right a little after 10 o'clock. I wasn't home all day, so it's not like I spent all that time on it today. I spent somewhere between 12 to 15 hours on this project. The bike is back together. Put my GPS on, which is kind of silly because I'll probably never be able to hear it now. Here's the remote that came with the stereo. One thing I couldn't put back on are these chrome accents that go on the speaker. And they just kind of sit like this. They're held on by some kind of adhesive, and I don't know what it is. So if you can think of any kind of adhesive I could use, leave a comment below the video, and I'll see what I can do. I hope this video helped everybody. The bike's all back together, desperate need of a bath, and it will get one tomorrow. Alright, have a good night, everybody. Alright, last video, guys. Just want to let you know that I found a way to get the chrome accents to stay on. I used double-sided tape. Why I never saw that before, I don't know. Yesterday it was in the upper 60s, lower 70s. So when I put the tape on here, it actually just kind of formed around the whatever was there before. So when I stick the plates on, they just adhered perfectly and they don't even budge or anything like that. So it's just fantastic. Here's the remote. I mounted that. I took a little block of wood that I cut a little wedge out of, like the corner of, drilled a hole in it, and zip tied it down. The one side I came across with this is that if you can see on the radio here, there's a little dot, which is a sensor, and it needs to match the center sensor. This stupid thing actually has to point at it, so I'm not too happy about that. But it's functional. I can use it while I'm going down the road. The back speakers obviously are mounted. I put some tubing on there to make it look a little bit more pretty. Put screws in here, the ones that came with it. Made sure there's a washer on each side, just to keep the water out, because we obviously don't need any extra water out there, and it doesn't look that stupid with that on there either. The other downside is the volume has to be up really loud. So it's up on 35 right now, which is ridiculously loud, but it was the only way my wife could hear anything. So even with the back speakers being mounted like this and angled up to face her, she couldn't hardly hear it when we're going down the highway. In town it was a different story, but it was just ridiculous having to have it loud. So people can hear you probably from 2 blocks away or even farther. But it works, and we'll just kind of go from there. I'm going to turn it on for a few seconds. I'm not going to leave it on too long because it is super loud and it just echoes in the garage. So you can imagine how loud it is outside as well. All right, that was ridiculously loud, but it sounds like you're surrounded, like a surround sound on here, and it's just fantastic. That sound doesn't necessarily stay with you on the bike through the helmet, but when you're sitting outside and just sitting in one spot, it does sit around you pretty good. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions, please leave some comments below, and we'll see what we can do for the next video. I think I've got just about everything I want done with this bike at this point, but if something does need to change or I want to make some kind of improvement, I'll definitely let you guys know. Have a great day, everyone.